Hello. Hey, how is everybody? Doing good? Hey, this week we had, I think 80 or 90 ministers from all over the world come into Kansas City for a big summit under the leadership of the most dynamic Donna Johnston. I don't know if you know her or not, but she's the one that usually has a halo around her head and she walks around. Anyway, are there any Unity ministers in the audience today? If so, would like to recognize you. Just raise your hand. I know there's... Good. Very nice to have you here. Also, many years ago, a good friend of mine and one of our congregants went off on a very exciting adventure of his very own, and he's returned today. His name is Jeff Cherry. He's returned as Chef Cherry because he's gone to gastronomical school. Is that what they call it, Jeff? Gastronomical school? Isn't that a strange name for the study of food? Gastronomical? It's almost like an oxymoron. Anyway, Jeff is back. Thank you so much for being here. It's good to see you. Many of you might have seen on the internet this week or on Facebook, there's kind of a funny little joke about two people sitting on a couch having a glass of wine. And actually, that's a derivation, or it is a copycat version of what actually happened to my cousin Ozzie. This is about 3 or 4 years ago. He and his girlfriend were sitting on the couch watching TV, and Ozzie, as usual, had his pint of wild turkey, and he was drinking it as they watched TV, and all of a sudden, just out of nowhere, Cousin Ozzie says, "I love you." And his girlfriend looks at him and says, "Is that the whiskey talking?" Now Ozzie said, "No, that's me talking to the whiskey." I have got one more thing that I'd like to point out to you, and that's in the front cover of our bulletin. There is a picture of a rutabaga. Many of you have heard my rutabaga story before, but I'm going to tell it again for those who are new because it actually brought me to one of my greatest epiphanies, one of my greatest spiritual awakenings ever. The rutabaga actually began as pig food. It grew in the Scandinavian countries. It grew wild in the fields. It was very hardy. You didn't have to farm it. It was cheap. So they would just turn the pigs loose in the field to forage the rutabagas. And this worked very well, but then the Great Famine set in. Food was short, so the people started eating rutabagas. And even when the famine waned itself back and food was plentiful, the Norwegians and the Swedes continued to eat rutabagas. Coming from a Scandinavian community, I grew up with them. And I don't know how old I was when I first discovered this, but I absolutely detested rutabagas. I didn't like the way they looked, I didn't like the way they smelled, I didn't like the way they tasted, I didn't like anything about them. But my grandparents, coming out of the Depression, made sure that we ate everything on our plate and nothing was wasted. So as a kid, you become very innovative and very creative, and you learn that once you take a bite of rutabaga, you simply put a napkin up to your mouth and you cough, and at the end of the meal, you've got a napkin full of half saliva, so rutabagas. Well, when I got to a point where I was old enough to make my own decisions, I made the determination I was never going to eat a rutabaga again because they just gagged me. For some reason, I don't know why, I had this tremendous aversion to them. Well, everything went fine, then I get into Unity, and I hear the statement that in God's great kingdom, there is a place where you can stand in complete harmony with all that is. And that sounded fun. I mean, I can stand in complete harmony with you and with music and with all sorts of other things. But then the rutabaga came forth. How can I stand in complete harmony with the rutabaga? And that was a struggle for me because it defied the principle that I just heard where you can stand in harmony with all things. So I struggled with this until I came upon the aha moment, the epiphany, the spiritual awakening, that I can be in harmony with the rutabaga. I can love the rutabaga, but just not on my plate as a food. So I sat down with a list of all the things that I could use the rutabaga for my enjoyment. Makes a great doorstop, a bookend. You can throw it back and forth like a ball. I discovered you can set it on the downside of a teeter-totter and then go to the upside of the teeter-totter and push it down and catapult it at the neighbor's house. All sorts of wonderful things came out of this, and the rutabaga became my friend. And then somebody also pointed out to me, the next time you sit down to a nice, big, juicy cut of ham, thank God for the rutabaga that fattened that pig up, because that's all part of the rutabaga's existence too. Now, you might be wondering why I'm even telling you this silly story, and I debated, for a minute or two not to, but it just seemed like an important part of my spiritual journey, and I'm going to tell you why. There's a time for each and every one of you when you came into this world, and oh my gosh, how I wish that you were able to remember that day, the day that you were born. People came from far and near to gaze upon you, to look down on you, and you had this power, you had this essence that just drew the love right out of their heart. They looked at you and they just melted with love. They wanted to hold you. They kissed you. They talked funny into your ear. They did all sorts of things because you were precious and you were pure. From that day to this, you've been on your very own unique and spiritual path and life path. In every single moment that you've been on that path from the time you're born till now, you've basically been doing two things, and that is relating to and interacting with life. Everything you've done, everything you thought, everything you felt, every place you've gone, it is all relating to and interacting with life. There's nothing that you can think of, no thing that you've ever done which doesn't involve a relationship of some sort or an interaction of some sort, and the two are really quite one and the same. So you spent your whole life relating to and interacting with life. Now, that being the case, you would think that the primary curriculum, not only in our elementary years, but in high school and college, would be to refine or to enhance or to evolve our ability to relate, so that we can move all of our relations and all of our interactions into a more harmonious state. Because harmony is the key of all relationships. Well, you might ask why that is so important. And that is because the first principle of unity says there is a God. One God. The Jewish God, the Hindu God, the Muslim God, the Christian God, the Native American God. There's one God. And that one God is not the mythological God that many of us grew up to believe in. It's not that God that was conceived in the mind of man, the image made in the mind of man, characterized in the mind of man. It's not that mythological, anthropomorphical God out there in the heavens on the throne, but rather it is an everywhere present spirit. Now that's a little bit to grasp at first. How can God be everywhere present? Well, just as in our atmosphere, air is everywhere present, God is everywhere present. God is in all things. The most accurate definition that I can give you of God is that God is it all. God is it all. That being the case, God is in you, God is in me, God is in all things. In the great kingdom of God that Jesus talked about, there is one thing going on. So if we want to have a deeper relationship with God, which is the primary objective in the spiritual path, and that's a preface to the second principle, our primary objective in this world is to deepen our relationship with God. So if that is the case, to deepen our relationship with God means to be in harmony with God, because there's no disharmony within God. It's be in harmony with God, and that means be in harmony with it all. Let's stop and think about that for a moment. If God is it all, and our objective is to be in a deeper relationship with God, which means coming into total harmony with God, then that is calling us forth to be in harmony with it all. Now that might seem like an objective that's a little bit impossible, too hard to reach, to be in harmony with it all. But that was all part of the rutabaga experiment. If I can become into harmony with the rutabaga, then that means I can come into harmony with almost anything. But yet, how do we do that? How do we come into harmony with it all? With those people that are cranky, those people that are push our buttons, those people that are abusive, those people that are disrespectful. That's all part of it all. It's all part of the great body of God. How do we come into harmony with it all? Well, there's two aspects to our being. We're all human beings. We're all here in physical form. And we're spiritual beings. As spiritual beings, we are given attributes, spiritual attributes. And as physical beings, the physical body expresses those attributes. The two work together in conjunction with the great spirit within us. So, spiritual attribute of love is given to us, and then the physical expression of who we are expresses that love. Other spiritual attributes are faith, expressed by the humanness of us. There is hope. There is compassion. There is confidence. All of these spiritual attributes are given to us, and when we employ them, they allow us to be in harmony with whatever is in front of us. Now, what I'm saying is, it's a matter of being for or in harmony with it all. In any given moment, there's two dimensions that you can stand in, two emotional dimensions. You can stand in a place of disharmony, or you can stand in a place of harmony. You stop and think about that wherever you go, whatever you do. You're in harmony with what is going on around you. You're in disharmony with whatever is going around you. The thoughts in your head, the feelings, the attitudes, the perceptions, your actions, your words, they're of a harmonious nature or they're of a disharmonious nature. And you get to choose. Now, we should choose harmony because harmony gives us a sense of connection. It gives us a sense of unity. It gives us a sense of being one with, and that feels good. You all know that. When you're with somebody special or you're doing something special and you're really connected to it, it feels good. Disharmony doesn't. It's that sense of separation, that sense of disconnection, and that doesn't feel good. So why would we ever choose to leave what feels good and move to what doesn't feel good? It's like when Robert plays the piano. There's two different ways in which he can play. He can play in harmony or he can play in disharmony. Robert, please give me a harmonious note. Perfect. Doesn't that sound nice? I was talking to them, Robert. I said, doesn't that sound nice? It's a melody to it. Now, Robert, give me some disharmony. Doesn't that sound horrible? Well, if you take that and put it into the emotional realm, it's exactly the same thing. When we're in harmony, there is almost a beautiful melody that is floating through our lives. And when we're in disharmony, it doesn't feel good. It sounds horrible. Now, why is that? It's because there's one power and one presence in the universe, and that is God. God is it all. Within it all, there is no separation. There is no disconnection. There is no sense of not being one. It is all God. So when we're feeling disconnected, when we're feeling not united, when we're feeling at odds with instead of at one with somebody, we're experiencing something that doesn't exist. It's not real. It's not based on absolute truth. And that's where the discomfort comes from. It's an illusion within our mind. It's something that we're thinking. We're thinking that we're apart from somebody. We're thinking that we're separate from somebody. We're thinking that we're disconnected from God or whatever it might be, and that's not based on absolute truth. It's not a fact. And so actually what we're doing is we're banging up against the absolute truth or nature of reality. Do you understand what I mean? There's only one thing, and that is unity. And so when we feel that sense of separation, in our minds we've stepped outside the nature of the universe, and we're really banging our head against an illusion, against something that is not true. So what I'm saying is we're being called forth in the spiritual path to be for everything, because everything is of God's Spirit. And in every situation and circumstance, no matter what you're facing, no matter who you're involved with, you can be for something. You know, I just live down the street, and oftentimes I'll drive by the horse fountain down on 47th and Main, and the people gather there to express their political opinions. And I've noticed when people gather there to protest war, when they're anti-war, they're down there and they got their signs up, and their fists are in the air shaking, and they're yelling, you know, out with Obama, out with this, out with that. And it's almost like they're outraged. It's like they're engaged in war with war. They're against it. But then on another day, you'll see the people that are for peace. And they're down there, and they have their signs. And you go by there, and they give you the peace sign. They're not yelling, they're not angry, they're for peace. You understand what I mean? If there is something that you don't like in your world, that doesn't mean we just put up with it and say, okay, that's fine. It's let me start to create something in this world that is the opposite of that. Let me put my powers towards the creation of something and not the destruction of something. Let me go through this world with no adversaries. And if I run into somebody that pushes my buttons or treats me disrespectfully, as Jesus said, I simply kick the dust from my feet and I move towards somebody that supports me and respects me and embraces me. Doing so allows us to increase the harmony in our lives to the point where that's all there is, in harmony with, accepting of, embracing it all. Fixing that which is abrasive and embracing and creating that which supports us in harmony. Think about that as you move into meditation. All those little rough areas in your life that are abrasive, that hurt, that don't feel good, that rub you the wrong way. It might be somebody at work, it might be a next door neighbor, it might be somebody in your family. It does involve a relationship of some sort that you're engaged in. So what can you do with that relationship in order to elevate it to a place where you're okay with it? Maybe make it where it's a long-distance relationship. Whatever it might be, you have within you whatever you need to accomplish this objective of being in harmony with it all. We wouldn't have come into this existence, we wouldn't be put in this universe if we didn't fit. If we didn't have what it takes to fit into this whole thing and be a part of it in a harmonious way, we wouldn't be here. And that's why we're students of life. Learning, progressing, evolving towards that place where life becomes more fulfilling, it becomes more rewarding, it becomes more cherished. Because harmony is what feeds the soul. It's through harmony that we truly connect with all that is. We now move into meditation.